Back to the Future is one of those movies everyone calls timeless. A trilogy people swear still holds up decades later, and somehow I've never seen a single one of them.
You're kidding, right?
I think part of me always felt like I missed my chance. Like this was one of those stories you were supposed to grow up with, and if you didn't, maybe it just wouldn't hit the same. So today I'm finally sitting down to watch all three for the first time, and putting that legacy to the test. I want to understand why people love these movies so much, but more than that, I want to know if something made in a completely different era can still connect with someone like me. Because if it doesn't, I might never really understand why this trilogy means so much to so many people. So with that in mind, I jumped straight into the first movie. Going to Back to the Future, I was completely blind. The only things I knew about Back to the Future were the time travel and the Air Max sneakers. Everything else was completely new. But right away, the movie surprised me, because I went in expecting chaos, complicated rules, and constant explanations. Instead, what I got was strangely grounded. Marty McFly immediately works. He's cool but not in a try-hard way, confident but never invincible, and he's just a regular guy who happens to be dropped into something absurd. And what really caught me off guard is that Marty doesn't have a traditional character arc, and normally that doesn't work, but here it does, because I don't think Marty is meant to transform into someone else. The story isn't about him becoming better, it's about how watching something as weird as time travel presses on someone normal. Then there's his parents. His dad is a complete pushover, and his mom feels exactly like the image I already had in my head. That 80s suburban mom who's nostalgic, stuck in the past, and quietly disappointed that life didn't turn out the way she imagined. And of course Doc Brown, a mad scientist but in the most lovable and unhinged way possible. What impressed me is how quickly you understand everyone. Not through exposition or dialogue, but just behavior. And then there's the time travel itself. I genuinely didn't expect it to feel this clean. There's no multiverse or endless rule stacking. It's honestly pretty simple. You mess something up, now fix it. And seeing Marty interact with his parents as teenagers sounds awkward on paper, borderline uncomfortable at times.
I gotta go.
But somehow it works perfectly. Watching Marty see his dad as this insecure, bully kid gives context to everything about the man he becomes later. And one of my favorite dynamics in the movie is how Marty ends up teaching his father confidence without his father ever knowing why. That relationship was way more engaging than I expected. And then there's Biff. Yeah, he's a pretty stereotypical bully, but watching him go from tormenting Marty's dad to cleaning his car is still incredibly satisfying. So by the time the credits rolled, I realized something. I did enjoy this movie. I respected it and I had fun, but I still didn't fully understand why it's considered legendary. The final stretch with Doc reconnecting the wires throws so many problems at you at once that it almost feels like the movie doesn't know how to end. And when it was over, I didn't have that moment everyone talks about. That, oh I get it moment. And that's when I started thinking, maybe the reason why these movies are so beloved isn't something you're supposed to feel after just one. So with that thought in mind, I went straight into part 2. Making videos like this can be a little nerve-wracking, because no one wants to be that person, the one who doesn't understand the hype around something everyone else seems to love. And it works both ways. Sometimes the internet hates something and you quietly enjoy it, and sometimes everyone loves something and it just doesn't click. Most of us have been there, and so I would just say it plainly. I didn't like Back to the Future Part 2, and trust me, I wanted to. Going into it, I made a real effort to be open-minded. I knew this movie was made decades ago. I knew I was watching a version of 2015 imagined by people who had never lived in it, so I gave it grace. But even with that grace, it just didn't click with me. What took me out wasn't just the tone or the aesthetics of the future. It was the way the story kept pushing itself forward. In the first movie, every mistake mattered. Every choice had weight. But here, things just kinda worked out. Little moments started stacking up. Marty walking away from the time machine in a neighborhood he doesn't know. Door wide open, by the way. He somehow doesn't hear a taxi pull up just a few houses away. Biff leaving evidence in the car, and then conveniently looks away so he doesn't see Marty get in the car. What are you looking at? And the more it escalated, the harder it was to ignore. Marty having full conversations inside Biff's car. Not whispering, not hiding, just talking. And then there's the moment that completely snapped me out of all of it. Marty jumps off the building to escape being shot, and comes back up with his arms crossed like the danger just vanished. That was the moment it stopped feeling clever, and honestly started feeling corny. And I don't say that lightly. I know this movie means a lot to people. For some, it's their favorite in the trilogy. But for me, it felt like it lost what made the first movie work. the grounded simplicity, and the tight cause and effect storytelling. To be fair though, there are things I appreciated. I loved how parts 1 and 2 feel connected. Watching the characters weave in and out of events from the first movie is genuinely creative and honestly ambitious for its time. That idea alone deserves credit, but even with that, the movie just didn't land for me. And when it ended, I wasn't just confused about this movie, I was confused about the trilogy as a whole. How does something this divisive end up being so beloved? That question stuck with me, and then I remember a comment someone left on my channel. They said, to really understand why something matters, you have to look at what existed around at the time. And that's when I realized I wasn't ready for part 3 yet. I didn't need another opinion, I needed context. So before moving forward, I went back, not in time, but in cinema. At this point I realized that I needed to step back, because I wanted to know why Back to the Future was so popular. But I also wanted to understand why it lasted, why people still talk about it, why it still means something to people decades later. So instead of staying stuck in how the movie felt to me now, I decided to look at the era it came from. So I googled the biggest movies of the 1980s, the ones that didn't just succeed financially but culturally as well. Movies that defined an entire generation. The ones that caught my attention were Star Wars and E.T. Movies I've already seen but never thought to compare them to Back to the Future. And that's when a pattern started to form. These movies weren't obsessed with complexity, they were all mostly simple. Clear emotions, clear goals, and characters you understood almost instantly. At their core, they were all about wonder, about adventure, and about heart. Not in a cheesy way, but in a way that made big ideas feel approachable. And that realization made me want to take it one step further. So I decided to watch Time Bandits, another time travel movie from the same decade, just to see how differently the concept was handled back then. And honestly, that comparison sealed it for me. Time Bandits is pretty creative, but it's also chaotic. And while I'm sure it has charm for people who grew up with it, it never fully pulled me in. So after watching that movie and looking at what the other big movies all have in common, something finally clicked. I think what people love about Back to the Future isn't the time travel. It's that it's an adventure movie first, with a wild concept layered on top. The characters are immediately likable, the humor usually lands, the rules are clear, the stakes make sense, and most importantly, there's a clean emotional through line holding everything together. Even part 2, despite my issues with it, was still far more accessible than a lot of movies experimenting with the same ideas at the time. Once I stopped looking at the trilogy like modern sci-fi, and started seeing it as an 80s adventure built on clarity, charm, and heart, I felt like I finally understood why it mattered to so many people. But even with that realization, I still need to know one thing. Does this entire trilogy hold up for someone like me? So with that question in mind, I went into the final movie. Going into part 3, I didn't really know what to expect anymore. After how I felt about the second movie, I was more cautious than excited. However, this movie felt different. Where part 2 felt busy, part 3 slows things down. It feels more self-contained, more focused, and that shift alone made it easier for me to settle into the story again. Instead of trying to outdo the concept of time travel, this movie uses it as a backdrop. This time the focus is on the characters sitting with who they are, and who they've become, Marty especially. What I liked here is that the movie finally lets him confront his own flaw, his pride, his need to prove himself. Seeing Marty choose not to react, not to rise to provocation, felt like a quiet evolution, and Doc Brown surprised me the most. This movie gives him something he never really had before, a reason to stay. For the first time, his story wasn't about his inventions or his obsession, it was about his connection. Watching him fall in love and choose a life over the thrill of discovery was very satisfying. Even the villain felt more purposeful here. This version of Biff, or rather his ancestor, ended up being my second favorite take on the character. He's still cruel and threatening, but in a way that feels more grounded than the cartoonish extremes of part 2. But what really defines part 3 is its tone. This movie is reflective, sentimental, almost nostalgic about its own story. It feels like the characters know this journey is ending and they're taking their time to say goodbye. To the adventure, to the chaos, to the version of themselves that existed before time travel changed everything. And when it all wraps up, the movie doesn't try to force some massive conclusion. Instead, it leaves you with something simpler, a message that feels very intentional. Your future isn't written, it's something you choose. And by the time the movie ends, that idea feels fully realized. This movie wasn't perfect to me, but I liked it because it knew exactly what it wanted to say by the end. It wasn't really about time travel. This time it was about growth, about choices, movies. About learning when to hold on and when to let go. And when it was finally over, I didn't feel amazed. I wasn't blown away. But I did feel at peace with where it ended. So to answer the question I set out to solve, did these movies hold up for someone born in a completely different era? Well, for me, yeah, just not in the way I expected. They didn't hit because of spectacle or complexity. They worked because of something simpler, something harder to replicate. Heart and a sense of wonder that doesn't age with time. And now that I finally understand why people love these movies, I can confidently say, I'm really glad I took the journey. Thanks for watching. If you want to keep going on this journey with me, check out these videos next. And if you would like to support the channel, Patreon and channel memberships are always appreciated. They help me keep diving into more stories like this.